All right, hello scholars, Walter Bowne here. Short video today, but essential video for the study of AP, language, and composition. I'm going to go through the holy trinity of the rhetorical appeals laid down by Aristotle in his Art of Rhetoric, little book right here. You will begin your first persuasion essay, but before we go that route, let us lay down the trinity. The first one, the first appeal that you have to know is logos. Logos. Logos is the appeal to reason, rationality, logic, and it appeals to the mind. Right? So when you see a statistic that says 9 out of 10 doctors or 97% of climate scientists, okay, that's using logos. It is there to convince you that, or to persuade you that you should not smoke cigarettes, that you should believe in human activity is causing climate change. All right, so logos is used to appeal to the rational thought. It's Dr. Spock, or is it Dr. Spock, or is it Spock from Star Trek? That's all about the mind, right? And you should use logos in your essays. And so when you're finding evidence, you want to find statistics, proofs to add into your essay. Will this be the only thing you add to your essay? No, because we're talking about the three appeals. And logos is one of them. Of course, we'll be talking more in depth about syllogisms. If A equals B and B equals C, therefore, if A equals B and B equals C, therefore, the transverse property or something, A equals C. So, Walter is a man. All men are mortal, therefore Walter is mortal, right? The very famous Socratic example. But then you can create a syllogism where you get someone to agree that A equals B, right? And then you get them to agree that B equals C, therefore A equals C. We'll get much more in depth with that. We have inductive reasoning, inductive, deductive, and a whole bunch of other stuff under logos. But right now, think of, okay, what are the facts, statistics, concrete examples that I could use to persuade my audience, and this is the art of persuasion, that my position is indeed the correct position. And this dates back, we're talking ancient Greece here, when you would have to debate in a forum that your point of view is the correct point of view, and there will be a new law until you have a new debate, and then there's more evidence that will contradict that law. Right? So if you're going into law, if you're going into so many different fields, and it can just be an argument at the dinner table, and you want to win the argument. If you study Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, man, you're going to be really, really good. Of course, there's so many other philosophers out there that will study the Sophists and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's logos. Okay, the second in the holy trinity of rhetorical appeals is ethos. Right? So think of ethics. Think of character. I think it means, ethos means character in Greek. I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Those of you viewing, Greek scholars. But it talks about the person's character. I like to think of it as your street creed. Why should we trust you? When Martin Luther King gives his speech at the Lincoln Memorial, and I Have a Dream speech, he's not just some guy who just happens to be on the podium. He has a long history of being in jail, Birmingham, the Selma marches. He's a reverend. He is the moral leader of the civil rights movement. So when he takes that podium and he makes that promise, he has built-in ethos. right? Presidents, Kennedy, those types of people, Reagan, Abraham Lincoln, Gettysburg Address. If you're a doctor talking about an issue about vaccinations, well, you went to Harvard Med School. You've seen what happens with measles and X, Y, and Z. So I should trust you. Now, if you're just some guy on the street who happens to have an opinion about vaccinations and you just don't want to believe in it, or you think it's good, whatever, well, who are you? You're just some guy or girl on the street. So ethos is so important because it establishes your credibility. When I write articles for, say, the Courier Post or the NEA or for the Philadelphia Inquirer or for any other kind of publication, I'd like to mention that I've been teaching for 20 years, that I've taught X number of students in the thousands, and that they are now doing well and blah, 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 because I'm in the trenches. A politician in Trenton can say whatever she wants to about education. When were they last in a classroom? Me, my colleagues, we're in the trenches. We see it every single day. So that ethos speaks to, yeah, I've seen it. And this is what I think about topic X, topic Y, topic Z. So ethos is very, very important. This is especially important if you're talking about something that has hit you personally, if there's been a death in your family due to alcoholism, drug abuse, vaping, if your friends are vapors and you see them jonesing all the time for a vape, for a pod, yeah, you got built-in ethos, right? Because it's personal now and it means something to you. And we acknowledge your human behavior, your human feelings, which will lead us into our next topic. So think about ethos on the topic, especially if you could say, even if you don't have an example or you don't have degrees in the subject, you've spent a lot of time thinking about it. You've read a lot of articles. You've heard lots of debates. Establish that, you put some time and thought into this. And so you want to establish your ethical qualities and your character. We do not want to believe someone who is unethical. We generally don't. We do. And there's circumstances in history that shows us we followed many unethical characters. But what is it about your ethos that will be convincing, right? Which leads us to our third and probably most convincing example. All right, the third and probably the most important appeal in the Trinity is pathos. Pathos, P-A-T-H-O-S. Walt Whitman probably said it best when he says, facts and logic never convince. It's the dark of night or the deep of night that drives into a person's soul. I'm paraphrasing it poorly there. This is where you use examples that touch the heart, right? Not the mind, we went there, and ethics, of course, these are all important. But it's the emotional examples that you can use as appeals to your listeners, to your readers, to effectively come them to your side. This is all about making logical arguments. This is not about bullying. This is not about slandering. This is not about anything else except making a logical argument full of these different appeals to convince, not just logical argument, but this using pathos in your argument, which is convincing. And you can bring in any number of doctors, people will still smoke, right? You talk about your uncle who died of cigarette smoking, and you say every Thanksgiving I set a glass of wine at his table, at his seat, and I toast to him, and you start crying saying, I wish he didn't take cigarettes. He was the coolest uncle ever, and I'm cheering him. I wish you were here to see me graduate. Okay, that's going to make me cry. It's going to make your readers cry. And guess what? If you're a smoker, you're like, I don't want to make my nephew cry. So pathos is so dangerous, effective but dangerous, because you can stir up emotions in people that like racism, like we need to take our country back. Harvard's becoming too Jewish, like in the 1920s. Do we want to be called a Jew school? And this was something that happened in the 1920s, of course, anti-Semitism, and then Harvard changed its admissions policy. So pathos is a very effective weapon. It can be used for very, very, very nefarious reasons if you ever watch any of Hitler's speeches. But coming from a person that has ethos, that has ethics, pathos can work very well. And it can be very convincing. And the emotional example. So as you're thinking about your topic, and you want to think about, okay, what can I use that would hit right here? What would draw a person's passions, emotions, and to make them believe and have them change their mind. That's the hardest thing, is to take someone that's here, and after reading your piece, they've moved. They might not have moved all the way, but you've moved them. You've at least got them to consider a different point of view, right? And there's many strategies for doing that. You don't come right out in their first sentence and say something that's going to make them not agree. No. You build on it. You build on it. I like thinking of it as setting a trap. You're leading them in, and then you close the door, and then you got them, right? And there are ways to effectively construct an argument and win, right? And it's finding the best appeals. Mark Antony, in his famous speech in Julius Caesar, Brutus, very respected, a lot of ethos, gives a lot of logic. He was claiming to be a dictator, an emperor. We are a republic. We had to do what senators had to do. And the public was convinced. That was until Mark Antony took the stage and started with the logos, but then strategically, with lots of rhetorical appeals that we'll be discussing, uses pathos and shows the bloody robe, the toga, and the deepest cut of them all. And I remember I was with Caesar on the night blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So he uses personal narrative to draw the readers in, the listeners in, and he totally turns that crowd around 180 degrees and starts the Civil War, which ultimately leads into the deaths of Cassius and Brutus, and paves the way and changes Roman history forever, world history forever. But it's that speech, and speeches are essential. The Gettysburg speech, Winston Churchill's speech, that changed the course of World War II. If Winston Churchill did not give that speech, we will fight them on the beaches, and we will be studying that in depth in class, they might have capitulated and sued for peace with Hitler. And he was not going to have it. He appealed to their sense of nation. The British people will fight to the last man, the last woman, and we will fight them on the streets, we will fight them on the beaches, uses anaphora, which you'll be learning. And so it's that emotional appeal, that pathos, that is so important in persuasive writing, right? In creating arguments, right? And that's what you're learning here to do, is to be convincing, to be persuasive, right? In whatever your topic is. You can have person A and person B have very, very different point of views, right? I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-life. You come up with the arguments. They argue before the Supreme Court or whatever, and then the Supreme Court says, okay, who has the best argument? Separate but equal is equal? Yeah, that's okay. No. More evidence comes out, more arguments come to light. No, separate but equal is not equal. All right, so in a democracy, persuasive arguments like this are essential. And if there's one thing that you can learn from this course, it's how to be a leader, right? It's how to be a leader, liberal arts. That's what we do effectively, hopefully, is teach you how to be a leader of your fellow man, of your fellow woman, and how to take charge, and how not to be cowtailed, and how not to listen to a dictator or to an emperor or to con men or to advertising, because advertisers use the same things to manipulate your emotions. But if you're aware of the strategies, then you can defend yourself against those strategies. A lot more to talk about here with the art of rhetoric. This was just an intro. I'll see you soon, guys. Good luck on your essay. Bye.